air at the MotorLand Aragon circuit was thick with a tension that didn't belong to a standard private test. There were no grandstands full of cheering fans, no flashing cameras, and no media scrums. Yet the atmosphere inside the Yamaha factory garage felt like the minutes leading up to a world championship decider. Behind the heavy steel shutters, a machine sat idling, a prototype that represented millions of dollars in investment and the desperate hopes of a struggling Japanese giant. But the man zipping up his leathers wasn't the usual MotoGP superstar. Nobody inside the paddock saw it coming, yet this moment would change everything about the season. For years, the wall between World Superbike and MotoGP had been treated like a border between two different worlds. One was for production machines, the other was for alien prototypes. But as the engines roared to life, a shadow loomed over the MotoGP hierarchy. A rider from the wrong paddock was about to swing a leg over the Yamaha M1, and the data he was about to produce would send shockwaves from Spain all the way to Yamaha's headquarters in Iwata. The mission was simple, a familiarization test, but everyone involved knew that was a lie. This was a trial, a high-stakes evaluation of a man who many believed was the only person on Earth capable of saving Yamaha from its downward spiral. As the pit lane limiter clicked off and the bike screamed onto the back straight, the stopwatch began to tick. And within just a few laps, the faces of the lead engineers turned from professional curiosity to absolute, unfiltered disbelief. But behind the garage doors, things were far from normal. What seemed like a simple mistake soon became something much bigger. When Toprak Razgatlıoğlu hit the first heavy braking zone at turn 16, the Yamaha engineers held their breath. MotoGP bikes are built for precision, for flow, and for a very specific type of aerodynamic efficiency. They are not designed to be ridden on the front wheel at 200 miles per hour. But Toprak didn't care about the physics of prototypes. He brought his signature, violent, and beautiful WSBK style to the world of the M1. The telemetry screens lit up in shades of deep red. The sensors on the front forks were screaming. In the history of the Yamaha M1, a bike ridden by legends like Valentino Rossi and Jorge Lorenzo, no one had ever applied the brakes quite like this. It was an extreme, daring, and unconventional approach that should have resulted in a catastrophic crash. Instead, the lap times began to drop. And they didn't just drop, they tumbled. Insiders reported that the adaptation speed was staggering. Normally, a rider transitioning from steel brakes to carbon fiber takes days to find the limit. Toprak found it in 45 minutes. He wasn't just managing the traction, he was manipulating the bike's very DNA. The data gathered from this session far exceeded the team's initial expectations, revealing a consistency that defied logic. He wasn't just fast for a superbike guy. He was fast, period. And that's when the paddock realized something was very wrong with the established order. As the midday sun beat down on the Aragon asphalt, the whispers began to circulate through the pit lane. Rival teams, including Ducati and Aprilia, had reportedly positioned observers at various corners of the track. They weren't just watching a test, they were witnessing a transformation. The rumors began spreading that Toprak's lap times weren't just competitive, they were mimicking the telemetry of the Spartan himself, Jorge Lorenzo. For a decade, Lorenzo was the gold standard for Yamaha, a rider who could hit the same millimeter of tarmac for 30 laps straight. Toprak, despite his aggressive reputation, was displaying that same haunting precision. He was able to explain the bike's characteristics in detail, from the way the chassis flexed under mid-corner load to the specific millisecond of throttle response on exit. This wasn't the feedback of a guest rider. This was the technical intelligence of a world-class developer. Yamaha technicians were seen exchanging glances, stunned by the rapid pace of the adaptation process. The M1, which had become a nightmare for many regular GP riders to understand, seemed to speak a language that Toprak already knew. He was maximizing grip in ways the factory team hadn't seen in years. The aura of surprise was palpable, and the feeling of what-if began to weigh heavy on the management. Yet the real twist hadn't even happened yet. The excitement intensified as Toprak's sectors began to glow. In the high-speed transitions of the Aragon layout, the Turkish rider was demonstrating a level of bravery that made some regular MotoGP riders wary. It wasn't just about the speed, it was about the message. This test was a statement. A statement that the barrier between WSBK and MotoGP wasn't a wall, it was a thin veil that Toprak had just shredded. Several rivals began to take this development seriously. Reports surfaced that some factory riders felt threatened by the sheer ease with which Toprak handled the M1. While Yamaha had been struggling with engine development and rear grip issues, Toprak seemed to find solutions through pure, unadulterated talent. He managed to exploit Yamaha's strengths in a way never seen before, leading some rival engineers to question whether the current MotoGP grid had been too conservative in their riding styles. Behind the scenes, the tension was escalating. This wasn't just a PR stunt anymore. The Yamaha garage became the center of a magnetic field, drawing in curiosity and fear from every corner of the paddock. The question was no longer, can he ride it, but how many of us can actually beat him? The numbers revealed a unique, aggressive, yet efficient riding style that promised to shake up the MotoGP dominance that had prevailed so far. But that decision pushed everything into chaos. Rumors and speculation began to evolve around the future of the Yamaha seats. If Toprak was this fast on a bike he didn't know, what could he do with a full season of development? The internal drama between Yamaha's top brass and Toprak's management, led by the legendary Kenan Sofuoglu, started to leak into the conversation. There was a mixture of admiration and concern. Some insiders claimed that the test wasn't as harmonious as it looked on paper. While the technical staff were in awe, the political side of the paddock was a minefield. According to rumors, certain figures within the team were hesitant to commit to such a radical change. They saw Toprak as a disruptor, someone who would not only challenge the rivals but would challenge the internal status quo of how a MotoGP team is run. Despite the political friction, Toprak himself remained calm. His confidence was clearly visible on the track. With each exit from the pits, he pushed the limits even further, trying different approaches in the technical sections and providing invaluable feedback on the M1's V4-like characteristics. This reinforces the impression that Toprak relied not only on talent, but also on a mature racing intelligence that few possessed. But nothing could prepare them for what came next. As the sun began to set over the Aragon circuit, the test concluded. The garage doors finally closed, but the conversation was just beginning. The international media began to highlight Toprak's name as the most explosive story in the sport. Many believed Yamaha had finally found their savior, a rider who could bring the Lorenzo-esque consistency back to the brand, but with a modern, aggressive edge. However, in the world of elite motorsports, talent isn't always enough. The poison chalice of the MotoGP move began to take its toll. The shock move to BMW in Superbikes later stunned the world, leaving fans wondering why the most successful test in recent memory didn't result in a full-time factory seat. Did Yamaha miss their chance? Or was the MotoGP paddock too afraid of the chaos a rider like Toprak would create? The Aragon test is no longer just a note on the testing calendar. It is a moment of proving ground, a ghost story that continues to haunt the MotoGP paddock. It proved that a new era was possible, one where the boundaries of the sport could be rewritten by a single man with enough courage to break where others dared not. If Aragon was a glimpse, it was a stark warning that a new star was born, even if the world wasn't ready to let him shine. The starting lights will one day go out again, and the question will remain, what if? What if the man who destroyed the records was given the chance to destroy the hierarchy? One thing is certain, MotoGP was truly shaken, and the echoes of that Yamaha M1 screaming through the Spanish air will be heard for years to come.